From the very moment Bruce Wayne witnessed the brutal deaths of his parents in the cold alleyways of Gotham, he was changed forever. That single event would define his identity, the path he would take in life, and the mission that would dominate his every waking moment. But as time passed, Bruce, as he became Batman, would come to realize that his fear, the fear that had been deeply embedded in him ever since that fateful night, was not solely rooted in his parents' murder. That fear, the one that propelled him into the shadows, into darkness, was something more insidious, more deeply rooted than he ever could have imagined. The loss of Thomas and Martha Wayne left a permanent scar on Bruce, a scar that he spent his entire life trying to heal. It was their death that lit the fire of vengeance within him. But as he grew into the figure of Batman fighting Gotham's worst criminals, something began to shift. Batman's fear wasn't simply about revenge or about the loss of his parents. It was the fear of failure, the fear of losing control, of losing the city he swore to protect. Gotham was never stable, and the deeper Batman went into its underbelly, the more he realized that it was not just the criminals he fought, but the very forces of fate that seemed determined to shape the city into a reflection of his deepest fears. What if, however, Batman's greatest fear was not just about his parents' death, but about losing himself? The person Bruce had become in the wake of that tragedy, the vigilante, was not simply driven by a desire to punish criminals, but by the need to assert control over his life and the world around him. Every villain he faced, every criminal syndicate he dismantled, was a manifestation of the chaos that lived within him, a reflection of the chaos he feared. Batman's war on crime wasn't just about bringing justice. It was about exerting control over the very darkness that had defined his existence. Bruce Wayne's fear is not simply the loss of his parents. It's the fear of helplessness, of being a child again, powerless in the face of a world that doesn't care. The night his parents were murdered, he was a vulnerable child, completely at the mercy of fate. He had no control, no ability to save them or to change the course of his life. The feeling of powerlessness haunted Bruce throughout his life, and as Batman, he sought to never feel that way again. Every criminal he captured, every bastion of hope he built in Gotham was a manifestation of control, a way to ensure that he would never again face a world where he was helpless. But this fear of powerlessness goes beyond just losing control over his surroundings. It's the fear that Batman might one day lose control of who he is, of the identity he has constructed. The Batman persona is a wall that Bruce Wayne built to shield himself from the pain, to keep the world at arm's length. But beneath that mask, behind that cold exterior, is Bruce Wayne, a man struggling with his inner demons. The fear that Bruce might lose his grip on that mask, that he might become too much like the criminals he pursues, is a profound fear that Batman cannot escape. The darkness of Gotham is not only external but internal, a reflection of the corruption that Batman fears may one day consume him. It is not just the physicality of crime that Batman fights. It's the psychological battle within himself. He fears the moment when he stops being Batman and becomes something darker, something closer to the villains he so vehemently opposes. What if he has already crossed the line? What if the fear that has driven him all these years has now become self-perpetuating, a cycle where the line between hero and villain becomes blurred? Each time Batman confronts a villain like the Joker, he sees a reflection of himself, a man driven to madness by the world around him. And yet, every time Batman chooses to spare a life, to hold back from becoming like the monsters he faces, he is further entrenched in the idea that he is constantly walking that line, constantly teetering on the edge. Batman's fear, is the fear of becoming the monster he despises. His fight against his own darkness becomes as essential as his fight against Gotham's crime. The true test of Batman's humanity lies not in his ability to defeat the criminals or supervillains of the city, but in his capacity to retain his moral center, to hold on to his identity as a man, not just as a symbol of vengeance. The idea that Batman's core identity is constantly at risk of corruption from within is a fear that haunts him constantly. The Joker's manipulation is a reflection of that fear. The idea that Batman might be driven mad by the very forces he's trying to control. Perhaps, what makes Batman truly heroic is not just his ability to stand firm in the face of chaos, but his willingness to face his own fear head-on. His greatest enemy is not just the Joker or Two-Face, but the darkness within himself. The fear that he might lose the one thing that has always defined him, his humanity. Unlike his parents, who were helpless in the face of their fate, Batman has control over his actions, over the choices he makes. But control is fleeting, and Batman must live in the constant shadow of the fear that he will lose that control one day. As Batman continues his war on crime, he finds that his fear becomes more than just a motivating force. It is also a self-destructive one. The fear of losing himself, of becoming more like the villains he hunts, drives him to question every action, every decision. The question of identity becomes central to his journey. Who is Batman? Who is Bruce Wayne underneath the mask? Is the fear that drives Batman truly about justice, or is it about self-preservation, about protecting himself from becoming the very thing he despises? As Batman struggles with this internal turmoil, he realizes that the fear of failure is ultimately what drives his obsession with perfection. He fears that if he fails, Gotham will be consumed by chaos, and he will have failed his parents all over again. But in that fear, he forgets the very thing that makes him human, the ability to hope, to trust in others, and to know that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is always a chance for redemption. The fear of becoming the villains he fights every night can paralyze him if he lets it. But Batman's true challenge lies not in the fear of failure, but in his ability to rise above it, to confront his own darkness and transcend it. In the end, Batman's true test is not just overcoming the criminals of Gotham, but overcoming the fear that has defined his life since that night in the alley. The fear of losing his humanity, of losing his sense of self, is the greatest battle he will ever fight. Not against the forces of crime, but against the very darkness within himself. As Batman's battle against Gotham's criminals intensifies, so does his internal struggle with the very fear that defines him. The tragic death of his parents, the event that originally pushed him into the shadows, no longer stands as the sole source of his torment. In the years that have passed since that pivotal night, Bruce Wayne, in his role as Batman, has come to realize that his fear is not just about the loss of his parents, nor the desire for vengeance. It runs much deeper. His fear is now rooted in the uncontrollable darkness within himself, a fear that he may never truly be able to conquer. Batman's role as a vigilante has always been intertwined with the concept of control. From the moment he swore to avenge his parents' deaths, Batman made a choice. He would never again allow himself to be helpless. His fear of powerlessness led him to train, to prepare, and to become something greater than a man. He became a symbol of fear, something to instill terror in the criminals of Gotham. Yet, in building that symbol, he also built a wall around himself, one that keeps him separated from the very people he is trying to protect. The deeper he dives into the chaos of Gotham, the more he realizes that his fear is no longer limited to a single event, the death of his parents. It is now transformed into a haunting question. What if he is becoming the very thing he fears most? The villains he battles, the Joker, Two-Face, Ra's al Ghul, and even the Penguin, are all symbols of something darker, something that reflects the chaos he has spent his life trying to control. The fear of becoming like them, of losing his humanity to the very darkness that fuels them, is perhaps his greatest fear. The deeper he immerses himself in the fight for justice, the more he fears that he is sliding toward insanity, that the mask of Batman might one day consume him entirely. The Joker is perhaps the most terrifying manifestation of this fear. While the Joker's chaotic nature seems to embody the complete opposite of Batman's ordered, rule-based approach, they share something profoundly dark in common: the willingness to embrace chaos. Batman's fear of the Joker's madness isn't just about the Joker's capacity for violence or his wanton disregard for life. It is rooted in the psychological link between them. The Joker represents everything that Batman could become if he allows the darkness inside him to overtake his identity. The Joker's unpredictability and insanity are frightening, but what is more terrifying is that Batman, too, is constantly walking the fine line between control and madness. The Joker doesn't just challenge Batman's morality, he challenges Batman's humanity, making Batman question whether his own obsession with justice might be driving him toward the same madness. As the Joker revels in the chaos he creates, he mocks Batman for his efforts to maintain control. To the Joker, Batman's fear of losing himself is the very thing that binds him to the world of order and structure. The Joker's philosophy is simple: embrace the chaos because it is the only true freedom. But for Batman, to embrace that chaos is to lose himself, to fall into the very abyss of madness that his parents' deaths caused him to fear in the first place. This is Batman's inner conflict, the desire to retain control over his world, his actions, and his identity, all while constantly being pushed by his fear of what might happen if he loses that control. Batman's relationship with Gotham becomes a reflection of this internal struggle. Gotham itself is a city of chaos, constantly teetering between order and anarchy. The more Batman fights to restore order, the more the city seems to slip into chaos. This makes him question whether he is actually helping Gotham or whether his attempts at imposing order are simply reinforcing the systemic forces of chaos that keep the city trapped in an endless cycle. What if Gotham can never be saved? What if Gotham's true nature is chaos, and Batman's efforts to impose order are merely a temporary illusion? Batman's fear is rooted in the realization that his role as Gotham's protector is unsustainable. The harder he fights to maintain order, the more he realizes that his own fear, the fear of losing control, is what keeps him from ever truly achieving the peace he seeks. The city's chaos, its criminals, and its supervillains are all reflections of the fear Batman harbors inside himself. They challenge his ideals, his code of conduct, and his sense of self. Batman's obsession with justice is not only his greatest strength, it is also his greatest weakness, because it forces him to constantly battle the fear that he may one day lose himself in the process. In his moments of solitude, Batman is forced to confront the reality that his parents' death may not be the only source of his fear. The tragedy that marked the beginning of his journey may have been the spark, but it is the fear of losing control that has truly shaped Batman's life. His fear of becoming like the criminals he fights, of losing his humanity and morality, is what drives his endless cycle of self-doubt and self-imposed isolation. It is this fear that keeps Batman alone, unable to form lasting connections with those who could help him. His fear of losing control keeps him distant from those who care for him, particularly Alfred and Commissioner Gordon. It also distances him from the idea of being more than just a symbol of justice, from the idea of being a man capable of experiencing love, hope, and happiness. Instead, he remains consumed by his mission, his fear, and his own isolation. Batman's ultimate battle is not with the villains that haunt Gotham, but with the darkness within himself. He must confront the fear that defines his existence, the fear that his obsession with control will consume him and transform him into the very thing he fights against. This battle is not one of physical combat, but of mental endurance. Batman's greatest enemy is not just the Joker, the Penguin, or any other criminal. It is his own fear, the self-doubt that threatens to strip him of the humanity that makes him Bruce Wayne. As Batman's confrontation with his own deep-rooted fears intensifies, it becomes clear that his personal struggles are just as dangerous as the criminals and villains who plague Gotham. The city itself, a mirror of his inner torment, is locked in a perpetual cycle of chaos and corruption, much like the fear that grips Batman's soul. The more Batman seeks to impose order over Gotham's streets, the more he realizes that he is not only fighting against the external threats that lurk in the shadows, but against the darkness inside himself, the very fear that drives him forward. This fear, much like Gotham, is a city of endless distrust, anxiety, and self-doubt, and Batman must come to terms with it if he is to ever find peace. Every victory he wins on the streets of Gotham feels hollow because the chaos he fights against constantly regenerates. This cycle echoes the fear of inadequacy that haunts Bruce Wayne, the fear that no matter how many criminals he brings to justice, no matter how many lives he saves, the very fabric of Gotham's system and his own sense of control is forever compromised. He is constantly reminded that his quest for justice is not just a battle against criminals, but a fight against the uncontrollable, against forces of darkness that transcend the physical realm. This relentless cycle mirrors his deep-rooted fear, the fear of failure. Batman, in his most vulnerable moments, is confronted with the chilling truth that his fear of failure is not merely about losing the battle against Gotham's criminals. It is about losing control over his own identity. The fear that drives him is not simply a fear of physical death, but a psychological death. The fear that he will eventually become like the very monsters he hunts, that his moral code will erode, and that he will no longer be the symbol of hope for Gotham but a reflection of its dark soul. This is Batman's greatest fear, to lose himself in the endless spiral of violence and revenge that the city represents, to become just another shadow in a city that is defined by its shadows. But in Batman's fight against his own darkness, there is something more powerful than the physical threat of Gotham's villains. Batman's struggle is internal, a battle with his own psychological torment. For years he has worn the mantle of Batman as both a shield and a weapon, but now he begins to question whether that very persona is what keeps him from healing. The more he embraces the persona of Batman, the more he distances himself from the man he once was, the man who was Bruce Wayne, the son of Thomas and Martha Wayne. But if Bruce Wayne is just a mask for Batman's real identity, who is he really? Is he still the boy who lost his parents? Or is he now something far darker, a reflection of the very fear that has consumed him since childhood? As Batman begins to face the truth, he realizes that his fear of failure is rooted in his inability to accept himself. He has spent his life trying to atone for the loss of his parents, thinking that if he could just bring order to Gotham, he could somehow reverse the death that haunts him. But in chasing justice, he has ignored his own humanity. In his quest to maintain control over the city, Batman has lost sight of the very thing that makes him human, his capacity for vulnerability, connection, and hope. His fear has transformed from self-preservation into something much darker, a fear of becoming the villain. Batman's journey has been marked by an internal battle against the very forces that shaped him: his parents' death, the trauma that followed, and his obsession with control. But now, the real question is whether he can find peace with himself. The villains Batman faces, from the Joker to Ra's al Ghul, are all symbols of the chaos that Batman desperately seeks to overcome. But could it be that Batman himself is no different from them? Could he be just another man shaped by tragedy, a man driven by fear rather than a sense of hope? This idea, which lurks in the back of Batman's mind, is one he cannot ignore. Batman's realization that he might already be the monster he fears the most drives him to take even greater risks. No longer can he ignore the fact that his fear of losing control might be leading him into dangerous territory. As his internal battle rages on, he finds himself pushing away those who care about him, like Alfred and Gordon, because he is afraid that if he lets anyone close, they will see the truth he has worked so hard to hide, that Batman is not just a symbol of justice, but a man broken by fear and trauma. Batman's journey becomes an exploration of his own psyche, an attempt to confront the darkness that has defined him for so long. As he faces this internal battle, he must decide whether to continue fighting against Gotham's darkness or whether to confront the true enemy within, himself. Can Batman ever truly redeem himself if he remains trapped in this cycle of fear, guilt, and revenge? Or will he continue to spiral, a vigilante in the shadows, until he loses the very humanity that he swore to protect? But there is also a flicker of hope in Batman's struggle. Through his self-awareness, he begins to understand that his fear is not something to defeat, but something to embrace. Fear has always been a powerful motivator in his mission, but it has also kept him isolated and driven by vengeance. As Batman starts to accept his fear, he begins to see that it is a part of him, not a force that must be destroyed, but a source of strength that can help him grow. Through this acceptance, Batman may find a way to reconcile with the child he once was, to heal the wounds of his past, and to ultimately become a symbol of hope, not just for Gotham, but for himself. In the end, the battle Batman faces is not about external enemies or chaos. It is about facing his own darkness and finding balance. His fear of losing control, of becoming like the villains he fights, is the very thing that keeps him from fully embracing his own humanity. Only by accepting his fear, understanding its role in his life, and learning to live with it, can Batman truly be the hero Gotham needs. Not a man defined by revenge, but a man who embraces the full spectrum of his emotions and becomes whole once more. Batman's battle against his own fear intensifies as he delves deeper into the recesses of his psyche, realizing that the darkness he has so long fought against might be a reflection of himself. Throughout his crusade, he has embraced the persona of Batman as both a shield and a weapon, a symbol of fear and vengeance to instill terror in Gotham's criminals. But now, this fear, once the driving force behind his war on crime, has become something he can no longer ignore. It is no longer just a fear of losing control or failing in his mission. It has transformed into a profound existential fear, the fear of becoming the very thing he despises. In Gotham, where chaos and order constantly collide, Batman sees himself reflected in the villains he confronts. Figures like the Joker, who thrive on anarchy and madness, are not merely antagonists but mirrors to Batman's own internal struggle. The Joker's chaos is a direct challenge to the order Batman tries to enforce, yet in many ways, the Joker represents a deeper truth. Both Batman and the Joker are shaped by trauma, both are driven by their fears, and both are determined to shape Gotham in their image. The Joker's insanity, his embrace of madness, is not just a rejection of order, but an acceptance of fear as a dominant force, something Batman himself may be on the verge of doing. Batman's fear of the Joker goes beyond the threat he poses to Gotham. The Joker represents the chaos. Batman has tried to keep at bay for years, a chaotic force that, if allowed to run free, would tear apart everything Batman has built. However, the more Batman faces the Joker, the more he realizes that this chaotic force is not external, but something that could easily exist within himself. What if, despite all his training, all his resolve, and all his fear-driven motivations, Batman is on the edge of losing himself? What if he too is beginning to embrace the chaos that he fights against? This fear of becoming the villain he hunts, a fear of being swallowed by the darkness, begins to creep into Batman's every thought and action. The line between order and chaos, between hero and villain, is not as clear as it once seemed. The more Batman digs into his fears, the more he begins to question the very foundation of his mission. Has his pursuit of justice transformed into something darker, something he might one day regret? Batman's greatest fear is no longer the loss of Gotham to crime or even his parents' deaths. The real fear is that in trying to save the city, he will lose himself, that in becoming the Dark Knight, he has already crossed a line, and there is no going back. Gotham's criminal underworld, from the gangsters to the supervillains, reflects this deeper truth. Batman has always fought these criminals, seeing them as the embodiment of the chaos he seeks to eliminate. However, in his battle to restore order, Batman realizes that these criminals might not just be the product of Gotham's failings. They are symptoms of a larger, more profound struggle within himself. The Joker, in particular, represents this internal conflict. The Joker's laughter, his madness, and his insistence that order is an illusion push Batman to confront the uncomfortable idea that he may be more alike to the criminals he fights than he has ever wanted to admit. The Joker's taunts begin to take root in Batman's mind, forcing him to ask, "What if I've already crossed the line?" The fear of losing control becomes increasingly paralyzing as Batman realizes that his methods of fighting crime, his obsession with punishment and justice, may be taking him down a path he can never return from. He has isolated himself from the very people he has tried to protect. The mask of Batman has become his shield from the pain, but it also keeps him separated from his humanity, from his capacity for love and connection. Batman begins to wonder, if he continues down this path, will he eventually lose everything that makes him Bruce Wayne, the human being who once had hope, compassion, and a sense of self? This self-doubt and fear become Batman's greatest obstacle. Each night he dons the cowl and cape. He's not just facing the criminals of Gotham, he is facing the deepest, darkest parts of himself. His own mind becomes the battleground, and his fear of failure is the weapon used to torment him. Gotham, with its constant state of chaos, becomes a mirror for Batman's internal turmoil, a place where justice and vengeance are intertwined, and where the line between good and evil is not so clearly defined. The fear of becoming a tool of vengeance, of becoming as ruthless and driven by hate as the villains he faces, haunts him. This fear becomes his constant companion. The more Batman confronts this fear, the more he begins to question his identity. Who is Bruce Wayne? And who is Batman? Has he become so consumed by his fear of failure and his need to control Gotham that he has lost touch with the human side of himself. Bruce Wayne's fear was always about being powerless, about losing control in a world full of chaos. But now, he must face the darker truth. The fear that the Batman persona, born from the trauma of losing his parents, is no longer a defense mechanism. It has become a prison, one that keeps him captive in a war he cannot escape. As the battle rages within Batman, he realizes that the answer may not lie in the destruction of his fear or in the elimination of Gotham's criminals. The answer may lie in accepting his fear, acknowledging that it is not something to be defeated, but something to be embraced. Only through acceptance can he understand the balance between order and chaos, between justice and vengeance. This acceptance does not mean Batman will ever stop being Batman. It means that Batman will finally become the man he needs to be, capable of understanding that fear is a part of who he is, not a force that controls him, but a force that drives him toward a greater understanding of his own humanity. Batman, for the first time, begins to accept that his fear of losing himself does not have to define him. It is his ability to confront that fear, to understand it, that will ultimately allow him to become a truer hero. This journey, this internal struggle, is what will finally allow him to embrace his humanity, to find peace in the face of the darkness that has haunted him for so long. And while Gotham may never be fully free from chaos, Batman's battle against his own fear becomes the key to saving himself, and possibly the city as well. As Batman continues his internal journey, battling against the very fear that has defined his existence, he begins to realize that his path towards self-acceptance and true heroism is far from simple. The struggle is no longer just about fighting crime or facing Gotham's criminals. It has become about confronting his inner demons, understanding the darkness within him, and ultimately embracing his fear rather than allowing it to define him. This moment of clarity doesn't come easily. With each passing night, as Batman faces the chaos that permeates Gotham, his fear grows more profound, and the line between order and chaos becomes increasingly difficult to navigate. The fear of losing control becomes more than just an abstract concept for Batman. It becomes a physical force that he must face each time he dons the cowl. His fear is ever present, lurking just beneath the surface, threatening to consume him if he lets his guard down. And yet, as he continues to battle his fears, he starts to realize that they are not as destructive as he once thought. In fact, it is his understanding of his fear that will become the key to unlocking the next chapter of his existence. Every decision Batman makes is now colored by his internal struggle. He knows that in the fight to save Gotham, he must acknowledge his weaknesses and embrace the things that have been driving him for so long. For Bruce Wayne, fear has always been about survival, about preventing another tragedy from happening. But for Batman, fear becomes a driving force that forces him to be better, to push his limits, and to constantly challenge himself. This ongoing battle is not just a struggle against the city's criminals, but a war against the very nature of fear itself. As Batman faces new challenges in Gotham, the familiar villains become more than just adversaries. They become mirrors to his own inner turmoil. The Joker, ever the agent of chaos, presents a mirror image of what Batman fears most. The Joker thrives in the unpredictable, and his insanity is a direct challenge to Batman's need for order. The Joker's ability to embrace chaos and reject morality forces Batman to confront his own fear of losing control, of being consumed by the very forces that he seeks to fight. In every interaction with the Joker, Batman is forced to examine the possibility that he, too, is on the edge of embracing chaos. But it is not just the Joker who represents this threat. Every criminal, every rogue element in Gotham seems to be a reflection of Batman's own struggle with his identity. Whether it's Two-Face, whose obsession with duality mirrors Batman's own internal conflict, or Ra's al Ghul, whose belief in the destruction of Gotham serves as a dark counterpart to Batman's desire to preserve the city, each villain tests the boundaries of Batman's moral compass. With every encounter, Batman is forced to confront the fear that his own obsession with order might eventually turn him into a figure of tyranny, the very kind of villain he has vowed to fight against. Through all this, Batman begins to question his motivations. His desire to protect Gotham is no longer just a mission, it has become a way of life, a reflection of his own need to maintain control over his surroundings. Yet the more he tries to shape Gotham, the more he realizes that the city itself, like the darkness inside him, cannot be easily controlled. Gotham, with all its corruption, violence, and chaos, is a mirror of his own fears. As long as Batman continues to fight to impose his vision of order on the city, he is fighting against himself. The fear of losing control over Gotham is not just a battle for justice, but a fight for his own identity, a struggle to prevent the city from becoming a reflection of the darkness within him. The challenge, then, is not about saving Gotham from criminals, but saving Gotham from the dark forces that are inside of him. In every fight, Batman is forced to confront the truth that Gotham's chaos is not an external force, but something that exists within him, something that he has been fighting but also embracing for as long as he's been Batman. This realization is painful but necessary. He is Gotham, and Gotham is a reflection of his fears, his flaws, and his inner darkness. The moment Batman stops seeing Gotham as something to be saved from the outside and begins to view it as part of himself, is the moment that he begins to understand that the real enemy is not the criminals in the streets, but the chaos within him that he's been fighting all along. This internal struggle forces Batman to rethink his mission. As he begins to accept the fear that has driven him, he realizes that his quest for control is an illusion. He cannot control Gotham. He cannot control the criminals, nor can he control the chaos that defines the city. But what he can control is his response to that chaos. In accepting that he cannot control everything, Batman begins to understand that true strength lies not in his ability to impose order, but in his capacity to adapt and embrace uncertainty. He begins to understand that his fear, while powerful, does not have to consume him. It can be a source of growth, of learning, and of transformation. As Batman confronts his fears, he also begins to form deeper connections with those around him. Alfred, who has always been a stabilizing force in Batman's life, encourages him to embrace his humanity, to accept that fear is part of being human, and that it doesn't have to define him. Gordon, too, becomes a pillar of support, reminding Batman that while Gotham may be forever in chaos, the human spirit can endure, and even in the darkest times, there is hope. Batman's ability to trust these relationships and open up to his allies becomes crucial in his fight, not just against Gotham's criminals, but against the fear that has isolated him for so long. Batman's transformation, then, is not about overcoming fear, but about understanding it. His fear will always be a part of him, but it does not have to control him. By accepting his fear and recognizing it as a part of his humanity, Batman can begin to heal and move forward, not as a vigilante fighting for control, but as a man who has embraced both his strength and his weakness. And in doing so, he will finally understand that true power does not come from conquering fear, but from coexisting with it and using it to fuel his mission, not as a source of pain, but as a force that drives him toward a more balanced human version of himself. Batman's journey takes him deeper into his own psyche, revealing that the fear he has long fought to suppress is not simply rooted in the loss of his parents. His fear of chaos, of losing control, is far more profound. Gotham itself, a city built on corruption, violence, and anarchy, mirrors the chaos within him. Throughout his crusade as Batman, he has strived to control the uncontrollable, imposing his own sense of order onto a world that seems determined to fall into madness. Yet with every victory, every crime syndicate he dismantles, and every criminal he takes down, Gotham's deep-rooted turmoil remains. The more Batman faces Gotham's darkness, the more he begins to understand that it is not simply the criminals who he battles, but the darkness within himself. As the Dark Knight, Batman has always been driven by a singular purpose: to protect Gotham, to restore order to a city constantly in chaos. Yet, with each criminal he encounters, Batman's fear grows. The fear of failure, the fear of losing control, becomes a relentless force within him, pushing him deeper into the shadows. He starts questioning if his very existence as Batman is contributing to the chaos that has plagued Gotham for so long. The Joker, in particular, embodies this chaos. While Batman fights to bring order, the Joker revels in the destruction of it. Yet, there is something unsettling about the Joker's insanity that draws a disturbing parallel to Batman's own internal struggle. Each encounter with the Joker forces Batman to confront the possibility that the line between order and chaos is blurred, that the very methods he uses to fight crime might make him just as much a part of the darkness he seeks to eliminate. Batman's fear deepens, not just of Gotham's criminal underworld, but of himself, of what he has become. Could he be spiraling into a state of madness similar to that of the villains he hunts? Has he been so consumed by his fear of chaos that he has allowed it to shape his very identity? Gotham itself is a reflection of Batman's inner conflict. The city, with its crumbling buildings, endless corruption, and violent factions, serves as a mirror to Batman's own soul. The more Batman fights to restore order to Gotham, the more he realizes that the system itself is broken, that the true enemy may not be the criminals or the villains, but the system of control he has tried to impose. The fear that Gotham has instilled in him, the fear of losing control, is what drives him, but it also keeps him trapped in a perpetual cycle of violence. In the deepest recesses of his mind, Batman realizes that his war against crime may never end. The more he wins, the more the criminal element adapts, morphing into something else, something more insidious. What if this eternal battle is merely a distraction? What if Gotham's chaos is not something to be defeated, but something that feeds on itself? What if, in his quest to maintain order, Batman has perpetuated the very chaos he seeks to destroy? Batman's fear transforms. It is no longer just a fear of failure or loss, but a fear that his entire crusade is futile. The more Gotham falls into chaos, the more Batman is forced to confront his own limitations. His fear is not just about losing his parents again, not just about becoming the villains he fights, but about being trapped in a city that cannot change, a city that feeds on its own destruction. The Joker's words echo in his mind, "You're just one bad day away from becoming me." Could this be true? Could the Batman, despite all his efforts, be one bad day away from becoming just another force of chaos in Gotham? This new dimension of fear drives Batman to isolate himself even more. He sees his own humanity slipping away as he continues to embrace the darkness that surrounds him. His relationships with others, particularly Alfred and Commissioner Gordon, begin to fray. These people, the ones who care for him, are constantly faced with Batman's detachment and increasing obsession with the mission. The very people who want to help him become the anchor he so desperately needs are pushed away as Batman spirals deeper into his own fear. Alfred, once a source of wisdom, now struggles to reach through to the man he raised, unable to stop the endless crusade Batman has embarked upon. Gordon, too, grows disillusioned, caught between his loyalty to Batman and his growing fear that Batman's obsession with control will only lead to further isolation. Gordon understands that Gotham cannot be saved through force alone. It is Batman's fear of losing control over the city that keeps him in this eternal battle, pushing away the very people who want to help him heal. But Gordon also knows that Batman's greatest enemy is not just the crime or the villains of Gotham. It is the darkness within himself that threatens to consume him. Gordon's loyalty to Batman is tested when he begins to fear that Batman may already be too far gone. Through these struggles, Batman begins to ask himself, what is the true cost of saving Gotham? Is it worth losing his humanity? Is it worth becoming the very thing he fights against? The fear of becoming a villain, of losing control over his own identity, continues to drive Batman toward increasing isolation and self-doubt. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, Batman begins to realize that the solution may not lie in defeating Gotham's criminal element, but in confronting his own fear and understanding that the chaos he fights against is a reflection of the chaos inside him. To save Gotham, Batman must first save himself, only by confronting his fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of becoming the villain, and the fear of losing his humanity. Can Batman truly reclaim his place as Gotham's protector? This will not be a fight against Gotham's criminals, but against the darkness inside himself, the fear that has shaped him into the Dark Knight. As he faces his own shadow, Batman learns that true strength does not lie in control or perfection, but in embracing the uncertainty that defines both Gotham and the human experience. By accepting his fear, Batman begins to free himself from the shackles that have bound him for so long. Gotham too can change, but only if Batman can change himself. The fear that has defined his life no longer has to control him. He can use that fear, transform it, and channel it into hope and redemption for both himself and the city he swore to protect. Batman's journey then becomes not just about fighting crime, but about healing from the trauma of his past and accepting the humanity that makes him who he is. Through this journey of self-discovery, Batman finally learns that the greatest victory is not over the villains he faces, but over the fear that has defined his existence. As Batman continues his internal struggle, the line between man and mask becomes increasingly blurred. The fear that once drove him to fight for Gotham's survival now threatens to destroy the very thing he has fought to protect. His war against crime, against the chaos that defines Gotham, is no longer just about defeating the criminals on the streets. It's about confronting the chaos that exists within himself. Batman begins to realize that his fear is not merely external but woven into the fabric of his very identity. The deeper he delves into the heart of Gotham's darkness, the more he is forced to confront the inner darkness that has been fueling his mission all along. The fear of losing control, of becoming one with the chaos he despises, haunts every decision Batman makes. His control over his emotions, his detachment from the world, and his ability to distance himself from human connection are all mechanisms he's used to keep his fears at bay. But as Gotham's chaos escalates and the world around him continues to crumble, Batman realizes that this detachment is no longer enough. He begins to understand that to truly protect Gotham, he must embrace his humanity and acknowledge that the fear he's been running from can no longer be ignored. The more he tries to impose his own order on Gotham, the more he understands that true order cannot come from force. Gotham's chaotic nature, its criminals, its broken institutions, and its moral decay is a direct reflection of Batman's own internal conflict. His fear is not just about fighting crime or defeating villains like the Joker. It's about his fear of losing himself, of becoming the very chaos he has spent his life trying to destroy. The more Batman tries to control Gotham's fate, the more he realizes that he cannot control everything. The fear of losing control is only a reflection of his need for control, a need that has grown so intense that it has isolated him from everything he once loved. The deeper Batman goes, the more his fears begin to consume him. With every encounter with Gotham's criminal element, every confrontation with the Joker, and every night spent in the shadows, Batman becomes increasingly isolated from the humanity he once knew. His war on crime has taken its toll. The Batman persona has become a prison, one he hides behind to shield himself from the pain of his own vulnerability. The fear of losing control over Gotham and the fear of losing himself pushes him further into the darkness. It becomes clear that the more Batman tries to fight Gotham's corruption, the more he loses his sense of self in the process. Alfred, the one person who has stood by Bruce's side through every trial, begins to see the change in him. He has watched Bruce sacrifice everything: his own emotional well-being, his relationships, his life, all in the name of saving Gotham. But Alfred knows that this war is beginning to take a toll on Bruce's soul. The more Batman pushes himself, the more he loses sight of the reason he became Batman in the first place. Alfred's warnings about taking care of himself, about reconnecting with the people who care about him, fall on deaf ears. Bruce, consumed by his fear of failure, refuses to listen, determined to solve Gotham's problems alone. Even Commissioner Gordon, who has always been a staunch ally in Batman's war on crime, begins to question the dark path Batman is walking. Gordon has seen firsthand how Batman's obsession with control is slowly changing him. Gotham's problems cannot be solved by a single man, Gordon knows. Batman's isolation, his refusal to trust others, has created a growing chasm between him and the rest of the city. Gordon's loyalty to Batman is tested when he begins to see that Batman's fear of losing control has taken him to the brink of madness. But it is the Joker who truly pushes Batman to the edge. In every encounter with the Clown Prince of Crime, Batman faces the mirror image of his own internal struggle. The Joker's chaotic nature, his desire to destroy order, is a direct challenge to Batman's need for control. Yet, in these encounters, Batman begins to see that the Joker is a reflection of his own fears. The Joker embraces chaos and insanity, while Batman fights to hold on to order, but both are driven by the same fear, the fear of losing control. In the Joker, Batman sees a glimpse of what he might become if he embraces the chaos within him. The more Batman interacts with the Joker, the more he is forced to confront his own vulnerability. The Joker's taunts about Batman's fear of losing control begin to unsettle him. What if, after all these years of fighting, Batman has already become the monster he fears? What if the very obsession with justice, with order, is what makes him so dangerous? What if Batman is already walking the line between hero and villain? In these moments, Batman's greatest fear becomes self-realization. He is afraid that all his efforts, all his sacrifices, might be in vain. That despite all his strength, his intelligence, and his unwavering resolve, he might ultimately be consumed by the very darkness he fights against. The fear of losing control becomes not just a fear of failure, but a fear of self-destruction. A fear that he will become nothing more than a shadow of his former self, a man driven by obsession, incapable of redemption. The turning point comes when Batman begins to acknowledge his fears, not as weaknesses but as part of the journey. He realizes that his obsession with control, his fear of losing himself, is the very thing that has kept him isolated from the world. It is his fear that has kept him from healing, from reconnecting with those who care about him, and from embracing his own humanity. By confronting his fear, Batman begins to understand that the key to saving Gotham is not just about fighting criminals and imposing order, but about learning to embrace uncertainty and trust others. It's about accepting that chaos is not something to be defeated, but something that must be acknowledged and understood. In this process of self-discovery, Batman starts to reconnect with the people who matter: Alfred, Gordon, and even the Justice League. Through their support, he begins to heal, realizing that the true strength of a hero lies not in their ability to control everything, but in their capacity to work with others, to embrace vulnerability, and to grow beyond their fears. Batman's fear, once his greatest weakness, becomes the foundation of his redemption, helping him transform from a man driven by revenge and isolation into a true hero, capable of hope, humanity, and connection. Batman's battle with his own fears becomes increasingly complex, forcing him to confront the core of his own identity. For years, he has lived under the shadow of the darkness that shaped him, unwilling to face the deeper truths about himself. His fear of losing control has been the cornerstone of his crusade, but it has also become his greatest adversary. Batman realizes that in his relentless quest to protect Gotham, he has isolated himself not only from the city, but also from the very people he's trying to save. This self-imposed isolation is not simply a result of his role as Gotham's protector, but the fear that drives his every action. Batman's need to remain in control, to be the unstoppable force against the darkness, has cut him off from the possibility of healing. Gotham, in all its chaos, becomes an extension of his own psychological state, a place where fear, violence, and control constantly collide. His failure to truly embrace vulnerability keeps him locked in an endless struggle against the very chaos he seeks to control. The Joker, always a reflection of Gotham's deepest chaos, serves as a constant reminder to Batman of what he fears becoming. The Joker's disregard for life, his insanity, is something Batman has always fought against. However, in facing the Joker, Batman begins to understand that the Joker represents more than just anarchy. He is the embodiment of uncontrolled chaos, a force that has no fear of losing control. While the Joker thrives on destruction, Batman fears it, and yet, in his own way, he is equally driven by an obsession with control and the need to maintain order. The very thing Batman fights so hard against in the Joker is the thing that has defined him throughout his entire life. This conflict brings a profound realization. Batman's fear is not simply about Gotham's future, nor is it solely about the death of his parents. His deepest fear is that he has already become the very thing he despises. The battle to hold on to his humanity becomes more urgent. Every night spent in the shadows, every fight against Gotham's most dangerous criminals, leaves Batman questioning whether he has crossed the line into darkness. the very chaos that fuels his enemies. The more Batman battles his fears, the more he begins to unravel the illusion of control he has clung to for so long. Gotham is not just a city that needs saving. It is a reflection of his own internal chaos, his own fear of losing control. With every villain he defeats, every crime syndicate he dismantles, the city shifts, yet remains fundamentally broken. Batman begins to wonder if his efforts are merely masking the problem, feeding into a cycle that never truly ends. The battle for Gotham becomes a metaphor for the battle within himself, and each victory seems increasingly hollow when faced with the realization that the true enemy is the fear of losing control, a fear that constantly keeps him from finding any lasting peace. By confronting this internal darkness, Batman is forced to reckon with the fact that his fear of losing himself might already be consuming him. His identity has become so tightly entwined with the Batman persona that Bruce Wayne, the man who once dreamed of a different life, feels distant, alien. Batman has spent so many years fighting to preserve the idea of Gotham, a city that he believes can be saved, that he has lost sight of the fact that Gotham's fate may not rest solely on his shoulders. By trying to maintain control over everything, he has overlooked the human connections that are integral to his mission. This brings him back to Alfred and Gordon, the two people who have always stood by him. Alfred has been the voice of reason, always urging Batman to reconnect with those who care about him. Gordon, despite their differences, has been Batman's ally, often finding himself torn between his loyalty to the city and his loyalty to the Dark Knight. Both men know that Batman's fear of losing control has driven him to a dangerous place, a place where even their support seems increasingly irrelevant. But it is not until Batman allows himself to accept their help that he begins to truly heal. Through these relationships, Batman begins to learn that he does not have to fight alone. The fear of losing control has kept him isolated, but humanity lies in trust and vulnerability. He cannot protect Gotham alone, and he cannot defeat his inner demons without facing the darkness within himself. As Batman starts to embrace the people around him, he realizes that he doesn't have to be the lone warrior forever. Gotham is not just a city to save. It is a place filled with people who, despite their flaws, are capable of healing and growth, just like him. By letting go of his fear of losing control, Batman begins to understand that he does not need to be perfect to be a hero. His fear of failure no longer defines him. It becomes part of his journey toward a more complete self. Batman's humanity, which he had been running from for so long, emerges as his greatest strength, allowing him to connect with the people he swore to protect. Gotham, too, can begin to heal, not because Batman defeated its criminals, but because Batman allowed himself to believe in others. With each step toward accepting his fear, Batman moves closer to embracing his true self. His fear, once a powerful motivator, becomes something he can control, not by pushing it away, but by understanding it. Through this process of self-discovery, Batman becomes more than just a symbol of fear for criminals. He becomes a symbol of hope and resilience for Gotham. Gotham's fate, it turns out, has always been tied to Batman's own struggle with his fear. Only by embracing his humanity can Batman give Gotham the chance it deserves. A city of people, not just criminals and vigilantes, where hope can flourish in the face of the darkest nights. As Batman continues to grow and evolve, the realization that his fight is not just against Gotham's criminals, but against the very fear that has driven him becomes more profound. This fear, once a compelling force behind his obsession with control, now becomes something he must learn to live with, manage, and ultimately embrace. The deeper he explores his fears, the more he recognizes that they are not weaknesses to be eliminated, but intrinsic parts of who he is, parts that have shaped his purpose and his role as Gotham's protector. However, this acknowledgement of his fear comes with the understanding that it cannot continue to define him. Batman's transformation is not immediate, and it is certainly not without resistance. Old habits die hard, and fear is not something that can be easily battled into submission. Even as he begins to see his fears as tools for growth, they still manifest in ways that challenge him at every turn. Every fight he faces, every criminal syndicate he dismantles, and every new villain that emerges in Gotham brings him face to face with his own insecurities. Yet now, instead of being consumed by those fears, Batman starts using them to fuel his resolve in ways that allow him to understand his enemies more deeply and navigate his role in Gotham with greater clarity. At the same time, Gotham's darkness continues to shift. It is no longer just a reflection of Batman's own struggles, but a mirror that reveals the collective fears of the people who live there. Gotham, as Batman realizes, is a city shaped not just by crime and corruption, but by the fear that its citizens live in every day. The chaos and violence that plague the city are not anomalies or signs of a broken system. They are the products of a deep-rooted fear that permeates every corner of Gotham, a fear of the unknown, a fear of powerlessness, and perhaps most acutely, a fear of change. Batman's role as Gotham's protector now feels more like a catalyst for change. He must no longer act merely as a counterforce to the city's darkness, but as a force of transformation in his own right. He begins to realize that Gotham's redemption lies not in his ability to defeat crime, but in his capacity to inspire hope and strength in the people who live there. His role is not just to protect, but to empower the citizens of Gotham to rise above their own fears and take control of their destinies. However, this shift in Batman's approach does not come without resistance. Gotham's criminal underworld, including those like the Joker, Two-Face, and Ra's al Ghul, is not about to let go of the power they have enjoyed for so long. These figures, each a manifestation of chaos in their own right, will not bow to Batman's new approach. The Joker, in particular, seems intent on reminding Batman that the darkness within Gotham and within him is unbeatable. The Joker taunts Batman relentlessly, using every psychological trick in his vast arsenal to twist Batman's understanding of good and evil, control and chaos. Yet, Batman, in his growing wisdom, realizes that his role is not to defeat these forces, but to understand them, to outsmart them, and to help others see that these forces, too, are a reflection of the fear and chaos within all of them. While the Joker remains a test of Batman's resolve, it is Gotham's people who will ultimately become the true measure of Batman's success. With his newfound understanding of fear and self-acceptance, Batman begins to build alliances with those who were once seen as mere bystanders in Gotham's struggle. Commissioner Gordon, Alfred, and even the citizens of Gotham themselves start to see Batman not just as a figure of revenge, but as a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of overwhelming darkness. The people of Gotham begin to realize that they, too, have a role to play in this fight for the city's future. Batman is not a savior in the traditional sense, but a catalyst, someone who challenges them to reclaim their own city, to rise above the fear that has kept them shackled for so long. This process of empowerment takes time, but it begins with small victories. The more Batman helps the people of Gotham confront their own fears, the more they start to reclaim the city's soul. Each act of resistance against the criminal elite, each protest against corruption, and each moment of courage from the citizens of Gotham sends a powerful message. Fear does not have to define them. Batman's role, once centered solely on fighting crime, now shifts to that of a leader, one who shows Gotham's inhabitants that true strength comes from confronting the chaos and fear within themselves. At the same time, Batman's relationship with his allies deepens. Alfred, who has always been his moral compass, begins to see a change in Bruce. The distance that once separated Batman from those who loved him begins to dissolve. Gordon, who has long worked side by side with Batman, also begins to see that Gotham is not just a city of violence, but a city of people, people capable of great change. Together, they start to see that the real battle is not just against the criminals and supervillains, but against the systemic fear that has taken root in Gotham for so long. As Batman's internal transformation continues, he also begins to understand the value of trusting others. He realizes that he cannot do it alone, and that Gotham's future is not in the hands of any one person, but in the hands of its citizens. He must learn to rely on the strength of the collective, to believe in the power of unity. This shift in Batman's thinking changes his approach not only to Gotham's problems, but also to the role he plays in the broader world of heroes. He understands that, as part of the Justice League, he is not just a lone crusader, but a member of a team of heroes who each bring something unique to the table. Together they can fight for a better future, not just for Gotham, but for the world. Batman's fear, once his greatest enemy, becomes his greatest asset. It drives him to understand not just the city, but the people within it. Through this understanding, Batman learns that true justice is not about control or vengeance, but about empowering others and helping them reclaim their own destiny. Gotham's salvation is not just in fighting crime, but in rebuilding the fabric of the city, one person at a time. Batman's transformation, though profound, is far from complete. Each step towards self-acceptance and humanity brings with it new challenges, especially in his role as Gotham's protector. Despite his growing understanding that fear need not define him, there are moments when it resurfaces, threatening to overwhelm the progress he has made. As Gotham's most dangerous criminals continue to push the limits of his moral code, Batman finds himself questioning his approach yet again. The Joker, in particular, remains an ever-present reflection of Batman's internal struggle. While the Joker's actions and philosophy challenge Batman's belief in order and justice, they also serve as a mirror to the deeper aspects of Batman's own psyche. The Joker's chaos, his embrace of anarchy, forces Batman to confront the reality that he, too, is driven by compulsion and obsession. While the Joker revels in destruction, Batman's obsession with control is his own form of madness. The two share an intense bond, not one of similarity, but of parallels. For the first time, Batman begins to see that fear of failure, fear of losing control, and fear of becoming the villain have shaped him in ways he had never acknowledged before. Two-Face's role in Batman's ongoing journey becomes equally significant. Harvey Dent's tragic transformation from the idealistic district attorney to the embodiment of duality forces Batman to face the temptation of fate. Two-Face's belief in chance and randomness mirrors Batman's own internal struggle with control. Batman has always believed that justice is something that can be meticulously planned and executed, but Two-Face presents a chilling question. What happens when fate itself is allowed to take over? What happens when chaos is no longer something to be fought against, but embraced? This realization is a pivotal moment in Batman's journey. The more he battles Gotham's villains, the more he realizes that they are not just criminals, they are projections of his own psyche, representations of the fears that he has long tried to suppress. In order to truly defeat these monsters, Batman must embrace the fact that they are reflections of his own struggles, his own insecurities, and his own darkness. His true battle is not with Gotham's criminals, but with the darkness within himself, the fear that he too could become something unrecognizable, something uncontrollable, just like the villains he confronts every day. This internal reckoning forces Batman to make a difficult choice. Will he continue to fight for control, or will he learn to accept the uncertainty that comes with being human? The fear of losing control has shaped his entire identity. Yet, in his pursuit of justice, he has also distanced himself from the people who matter most. His relationship with Alfred has been strained by his increasing isolation, and the more Batman refuses to confront his own humanity, the more he alienates those who care for him. Gordon, too, begins to notice the growing distance between them. While the two have always shared a deep bond of trust and mutual respect, Gordon can see that Batman's struggle with his own fear has caused him to pull away from the very foundation of their partnership. Gotham's criminals are not the only ones who need to be stopped. Batman himself needs to confront his own inner demons if he is ever to find peace. However, Gordon knows that Batman's mission has always been about more than just fighting crime. It's about serving Gotham. To preserve the city's soul, Batman must accept his own humanity, the very thing he's been running from. This internal war also forces Batman to question his approach to crime fighting. For years, he has used his physical strength, his gadgets, and his intellect to fight Gotham's villains. But this fight has become more complex than simply defeating crime. The chaos Batman faces is not just a battle of good versus evil. It is a battle of ideologies, a war between order and chaos, between control and freedom. Batman begins to realize that his fear of losing control is a reflection of his desire for certainty, the belief that he can somehow impose order on a world that will always be unpredictable. This is where Batman's true growth lies, in his ability to accept that the world is chaotic and that he cannot always control its outcome. The fear he has lived with for so long is not something to defeat, but something to acknowledge. He can no longer let his obsession with control define his identity. Instead, he must learn to live with uncertainty and trust others. Only by embracing his humanity, by learning that it's okay to be vulnerable, can Batman truly find peace and reclaim his role as Gotham's protector. The city needs Batman, but more than that, Bruce Wayne needs to accept himself. Through this process of self-discovery, Batman is able to form a deeper connection with Gordon and Alfred. He begins to trust them more, sharing his fears and insecurities, something he had long kept buried. Gotham's future is no longer solely in Batman's hands. It is in the hands of its citizens, Gordon and Alfred, the people who care for the man beneath the mask. Batman understands that his role is not just to save Gotham, but to inspire others to reclaim their own city, to show them that fear does not define them, that even in the face of chaos, there is hope. This new understanding of self and Gotham shapes Batman's future actions. He is no longer just a vigilante fighting crime alone in the shadows. He is now a leader, someone who empowers others to stand alongside him in the fight for justice. By acknowledging his own fear, Batman has learned that he does not have to fight Gotham's darkness on his own. The city's redemption lies not just in his ability to defeat criminals, but in the unity and resilience of its people. Through this transformation, Batman finally understands that true strength does not lie in perfect control, but in the willingness to face the unknown, to embrace vulnerability, and to believe in others. Gotham is not a city that can be saved by force alone, but by a community coming together to overcome its fears. and in facing his own fear, Batman finally becomes the symbol of hope he has always strived to be, not just for Gotham, but for himself. As Batman moves forward with this new understanding of himself, he finds that the dynamics of his role as Gotham's protector begin to shift in ways he never expected. Gotham, once a city defined by chaos and violence, begins to feel a subtle shift in its atmosphere as Batman's newfound acceptance of his own fear starts to ripple outward. For the first time, Batman's focus is not solely on fighting the darkness outside, but on working with others to build a better future for the city. Gotham's soul, once fractured and broken by the continuous cycles of crime, now has the chance to heal, not through Batman's relentless pursuit of order, but through the collaboration of its citizens and its heroes. Batman's internal journey toward embracing vulnerability has a profound impact on his relationships, both with his allies and the people of Gotham. Alfred, who has always been the quiet anchor in Bruce's tumultuous life, begins to see a change in the man he has cared for and raised. Alfred's guidance, once reserved for the stoic protector he had known, now becomes more focused on helping Bruce understand the power of trust. Alfred's words of wisdom shift from admonishments to deeper discussions on the human condition and the struggles Batman faces in accepting his own imperfections. He continues to remind Batman that hope is born not from perfection, but from the willingness to stand up in the face of adversity, to make a difference even when the odds seem insurmountable. Alfred's faith in Bruce's humanity acts as a reminder that Batman does not have to be perfect to be a symbol of hope. Gordon also begins to recognize the evolution in Batman's approach to the fight for Gotham's soul. Once, Gordon feared that Batman's obsession with control would alienate him from the people of Gotham. But now, with Batman learning to embrace his humanity, Gordon sees that Batman's true strength lies in his ability to work alongside others, to build relationships rooted in mutual trust. The police force, once a hesitant ally in Batman's crusade, begins to respect him not just as a masked vigilante, but as a leader who is willing to trust those around him. Gotham's people, too, begin to see Batman not just as a figure of fear, but as a protector, someone who believes in the power of unity and community. This shift in perspective allows Batman to become an even more formidable force for good in Gotham. As he moves away from the isolation he once thought necessary for his mission, he begins to see that Gotham's true strength lies in the collective action of its citizens. No longer can he shoulder the burden of the city alone. In the face of Gotham's darkest nights, Batman learns to believe in others, in Alfred, in Gordon, in the citizens he once viewed as victims of the city's chaos. The realization that Gotham's future is not his responsibility alone, but a shared endeavor marks a turning point in Batman's evolution. While this shift toward accepting vulnerability and building alliances is key to his growth, it doesn't come without its challenges. Gotham's criminal underworld, led by the likes of Two-Face, Ra's al Ghul, and of course the Joker, does not simply vanish because Batman learns to embrace his human side. These villains, fueled by their own chaos and insatiable desire for control, continue to push Batman's resolve and his newly redefined sense of purpose. Ra's al Ghul, in particular, remains a formidable adversary, as his belief in the destruction and rebirth of Gotham runs counter to Batman's newfound desire to heal the city rather than tear it down. But Ra's also provides a unique opportunity for Batman to reflect on the foundations of his mission. Ra's al Ghul, who has spent centuries viewing Gotham as a broken city in need of destruction, challenges Batman's belief in redemption. Ra's represents the idea that true change can only come through catastrophe and rebirth, a philosophy that Batman rejects. In their confrontations, Batman's understanding of his own fear, of losing control, of embracing the chaos, helps him see that true transformation comes not from violence, but from understanding and cooperation. Two-Face, whose tragic story embodies Batman's internal conflict between order and chaos, serves as another reflection of the choices Batman faces. Harvey Dent's duality, once a promising district attorney who became the embodiment of chance, presents a stark contrast to Batman's rigid sense of justice. Two-Face's belief that fate should be left to the roll of a coin challenges Batman's need to control outcomes and to impose his own sense of justice. Batman begins to realize that his journey is not simply about making the right choices, but about learning to live with uncertainty, to understand that justice is not always a matter of right and wrong, but of balance and humanity. The Joker, ever the wild card in Batman's life, challenges him in ways no other villain can. The Joker represents the chaos that Batman has always fought against, but in his twisted philosophy, Batman begins to see that chaos is not something to be defeated. Rather, it is something that exists within him, and by embracing it, Batman learns that order cannot be imposed on the world. Instead, balance must be struck between order and chaos. The Joker's influence on Batman reaches its peak when the two face each other in a final confrontation that forces Batman to realize the true cost of control. He can no longer defeat the Joker by simply imposing his own sense of order. He must accept the unpredictability that comes with being human and learn to adapt to the ever-changing nature of life. Through each of these challenges, Batman's transformation becomes not just a physical one, but a mental and emotional journey. He must reconcile his past with the man he has become. His fear, once a tool for survival, becomes a source of strength as he learns to live with uncertainty and embrace vulnerability. The loss of his parents, the trauma of Gotham's ongoing violence, and the obsession with justice all find their place in his self-acceptance. Batman understands that true heroism is not about perfection, but about growth and acceptance, both of himself and of the world around him. In this new phase of his journey, Batman finds a new purpose to heal Gotham, not by forcing order, but by inspiring change through understanding, cooperation, and shared responsibility. His fear no longer drives him to control the world around him, but to work with it, embracing the chaos that makes Gotham a city of endless possibilities. As Batman grows in his understanding of fear, vulnerability, and humanity, he finds himself in a new, even more precarious position. Gotham, a city that has been a constant battlefield of his emotions and ideals, begins to feel different. The constant struggle against crime and corruption, once his sole focus, is now seen in a different light. Batman realizes that his approach to Gotham has been too isolated, too driven by fear. It is not the criminals he faces, but the cycle of fear within the city that perpetuates the madness. And just as he battles the criminals in the streets, Batman now has to fight against the internal chaos within Gotham's soul. Gotham is not just a city. It is a reflection of Batman's inner turmoil. It is a place built on fear, corruption, and mistrust, much like the mind of a man who has spent decades fighting to control what he cannot. The more he learns about the roots of Gotham's problems, the more he realizes that it cannot be fixed by force alone. Batman has spent too long trying to fix Gotham through brute force and control, but in doing so, he has inadvertently perpetuated the fear that fuels its darkness. To truly save the city, he must learn to face the fear, to work with it, rather than against it. The darkness, Batman has been fighting is not external. It is the darkness within the people of Gotham, a darkness that has been breeding for generations. Bruce Wayne's fear of losing control, of becoming like the very villains he faces, has kept him from truly connecting with Gotham's people. He has been too busy fighting the shadows to see the light that exists in Gotham, the resilience of its people, the hope that continues to flicker even in the darkest corners. This realization comes slowly, almost painfully, as Batman begins to realize that he is not alone in this fight. The citizens of Gotham have been living in fear, yes, but they have also been struggling to survive, to rise above the chaos that defines their lives. Batman's role as a protector, as a symbol, begins to evolve into something more. No longer is he a figure of isolation, a lone crusader fighting for justice. Instead, he becomes a catalyst for unity, a force that inspires others to step into the light and fight for their city. With his new perspective, Batman reaches out to Gotham's citizens, and more importantly, he reaches out to the other heroes who have long fought beside him. The Justice League, a team of powerful, often distant individuals, becomes a source of strength for Batman as he grapples with his own internal battle. He starts to see that strength does not lie in control, but in unity. It is through collaboration that Gotham can be saved, not just by Batman, but by the people who live there. The heroes of the Justice League become not just allies in Batman's crusade, but partners in Gotham's journey toward healing. Through his new role as a leader, Batman begins to train the people of Gotham to believe in their own strength. He helps them see that fear does not have to define their lives, that they too have the power to change their city. Gotham's suffering is no longer an excuse for revenge, but a call to action for growth, resilience, and community. Batman realizes that for all his efforts, Gotham cannot be saved by one man, no matter how powerful. It must be a collective effort, a shared responsibility between those who have suffered, those who have survived, and those who have the strength to help rebuild. This change in Batman's mindset not only affects Gotham's citizens, but it also impacts his relationship with Gordon, Alfred, and the rest of his inner circle. Alfred, ever the voice of reason, sees the transformation in Bruce and offers his guidance. His words, once filled with quiet concern, now become a source of hope for Bruce. He reminds him that it is not his mission alone, but the mission of those who stand by him. Gordon, too, begins to see the change. The partnership between Batman and the GCPD grows stronger, built not just on a shared fight against crime, but on a shared understanding that Gotham's future lies in the hands of everyone. However, even with these new alliances, Batman knows that Gotham will not be healed overnight. The fear and corruption that have plagued the city for so long cannot be erased in a single action, a single victory. It will take time, patience, and continued effort to break the cycle that has held Gotham in its grasp for so long. Batman's resolve remains strong, but he begins to realize that he can no longer act with the same intensity and singular focus he once did. The people of Gotham must also play a role in their own redemption. This internal evolution leads Batman to redefine his mission. It is no longer about being the lone savior, the dark avenger of Gotham. He shares his purpose with Gotham's people, recognizing that they too have power within themselves to change their city. This shift in perspective also impacts his interactions with Gotham's villains, who now see a Batman who is more connected to the city he protects. As Batman reaches out to his allies, the villains begin to realize that they too are not beyond the city's transformation. Even the Joker, who once saw Batman as a mere antagonist, begins to understand the true battle that Batman faces. The Joker's role is no longer just about chaos. It is about pushing Batman to embrace his fear and understand his humanity. Batman, now more aware of the city's complexities, faces his final challenge, not in defeating Gotham's criminals, but in continuing to lead Gotham's citizens through the storm. As he continues to fight for justice, he also fights for a future where Gotham is not just a city of survival, but a city of hope. He embraces the chaos, understanding that it will always be a part of him and the city, but it no longer controls him. The fear he once dreaded becomes his strength, allowing him to help Gotham rise from the ashes of its own suffering. As Batman steps further into this new chapter of his journey, the city of Gotham begins to reveal new complexities and challenges, but also glimpses of a future that he had not dared to imagine before. His understanding of fear, not as a weakness but as a tool for growth, starts to reshape the very foundation of his mission. Gotham, for all its darkness and despair, is a city full of potential, and Batman begins to realize that true heroism does not lie in controlling chaos, but in inspiring change from within. This realization pushes Batman to refocus his efforts, shifting his approach from simply fighting crime to healing the wounds that have long festered within Gotham's heart. He starts to involve himself in community building, working not just with his traditional allies like Alfred Gordon and the Justice League, but with local leaders, activists, and citizens who want to take an active role in reclaiming their city. Batman's new role is not to be the sole protector of Gotham, but to be a catalyst for unity, someone who encourages the people of the city to rise above their fear and take control of their destiny. Batman's influence begins to reach farther than he ever expected. Where once Gotham's residents felt helpless, they now feel empowered. Neighborhoods that had once been abandoned or riddled with crime begin to show signs of life, of rebirth. It is not that crime has disappeared, but there is a new spirit in the city, a belief that things can get better, that hope can flourish even in the darkest of places. Batman's role evolves from a symbol of vengeance to a beacon of hope, a symbol of the city's ability to overcome adversity. In working alongside the people of Gotham, Batman realizes that they too have a part to play in shaping the future. However, this transformation does not come without its difficulties. The criminal underworld of Gotham, once something Batman could easily fight with brute force, begins to fight back in ways Batman was not prepared for. Gotham's villains are no longer just criminals to be captured or stopped. They are forces of resistance, pushing back against the change Batman is trying to bring about. Ra's al Ghul, who has always believed that Gotham needs to be destroyed to be rebuilt, continues to challenge Batman's ideals. He sees Batman's attempts at healing the city as naive, weak even. Ra's believes that only through destruction can true change come. His confrontations with Batman become not just physical battles but ideological ones, forcing Batman to question his own methods and ideals. Two-Face's actions also complicate Batman's progress. Harvey Dent, once Gotham's shining beacon of justice, has become a symbol of Gotham's duality. His coin-flip decisions, which once represented the unpredictable nature of justice, now stand in stark contrast to Batman's growing understanding of balance. Two-Face embodies the chaos that exists both in Gotham and in Batman's own soul. As Batman faces off with him once again, he realizes that the duality within Two-Face is a reflection of the duality within himself. Batman's fear of becoming like the very criminals he fights mirrors Harvey's own fall from grace, and with every encounter, Batman begins to understand that justice is not as simple as right versus wrong, but is defined by the choices each person makes in the face of chaos. Yet, it is the Joker who remains Batman's greatest challenge, not just as a villain, but as the embodiment of chaos itself. Joker's relentless pursuit of disorder forces Batman to question everything about the meaning of his own mission. Every action Batman takes, every criminal he defeats, seems to be met with a new form of chaos created by the Joker. In their final confrontation, Batman is pushed to the brink, but instead of defeating the Joker through violence or force, he is forced to accept that chaos is not something that can be completely controlled or eradicated. The Joker's madness is not just an external force, but a reflection of the human condition, the unpredictable, irrational elements of existence that cannot be removed but must be understood and dealt with. It is in his final moments with the Joker that Batman realizes the most profound truth, that his fear of becoming the villain was always about control. To fight the Joker, Batman must accept that the world will never be perfectly ordered. The Joker is not Batman's enemy because he is evil, but because he represents everything Batman has tried to fight against, the chaos that exists within himself. In embracing that chaos, Batman is able to finally let go of his need to control every aspect of Gotham's fate. This acceptance is the final step in Batman's transformation. He is no longer just the Dark Knight, a figure defined by his fear and need for control. He is now a man who has accepted his fear, who understands that it does not define him, but rather motivates him to be better, to grow, and to help others grow. Batman's humanity is not lost. It is rediscovered in the process of accepting the fear he once ran from. As Batman's relationship with Gotham evolves, so does the city itself. The people of Gotham, inspired by Batman's self-acceptance and his willingness to work alongside others, begin to take an active role in shaping the future of their home. Batman no longer stands as an isolated figure of vengeance, but as a leader, someone who believes in the collective power of the people. Gotham's soul, once tarnished by corruption and violence, begins to heal, not through the force of one man, but through the resilience and hope of the people who call the city home. Batman has found peace in his acceptance of fear, in his understanding that Gotham is not just a city to be controlled, but a city to be empowered. He has learned that true strength does not lie in control, but in the ability to adapt, to embrace vulnerability, and to lead through example. Gotham, like Batman, is not perfect, but with hope and unity, it can rise above its own darkness. Batman's transformation continues to unfold in profound ways as he learns to live with his fears rather than let them control him. This new chapter in his journey does not simply change the way he approaches crime fighting, but also redefines his place in the world of heroes. His evolution from a lone vigilante to a leader who works alongside others is the next natural step in his personal growth. The realization that he cannot do it all alone, that his strength is not found in isolation but in unity and collaboration, reshapes not only his relationship with Gotham, but also his role in the larger world. As Gotham begins to heal, Batman's connection to the people of the city deepens. He becomes more than just a figure in the shadows, fighting criminals with brute force. His actions shift toward inspiring change on a grassroots level, encouraging citizens to take responsibility for their own futures. Batman's mission evolves into something far more complicated, more nuanced. He no longer simply fights crime. He works to empower the people of Gotham to stand against the forces of chaos and corruption that have plagued them for so long. It is no longer a matter of control or revenge. It is about redemption for both Gotham and himself. Gotham's people begin to rise up in ways Batman had never imagined. Community leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens begin to work together in ways they had never done before. The neighborhoods that once lived in constant fear now feel a renewed sense of hope. People no longer wait for Batman to save them. They work together to save their city, just as Batman has inspired them to. Grassroots movements spring up across the city, not because of Batman's brute force, but because he has shown Gotham's citizens that they have the power to create change. Gotham is no longer a city held together by fear, but one that is actively shaping its own future. This shift in perspective brings with it new challenges, but also opportunities. Gotham's criminals, once driven by fear of the Dark Knight, find themselves struggling against an emerging resilience in the population. The criminal underworld, once an unstoppable force, now finds itself confronted by a city that refuses to bend to its will. The crime syndicates are forced to adapt to a new Gotham, one where Batman's fear has shifted from just the criminals to every citizen having a part in the fight. This new Gotham doesn't rely solely on Batman but on a collective effort to break free from the cycle of violence and despair that has held it in place for so long. The villains that Batman once fought individually now represent larger societal issues that Gotham has to confront as a whole. Ra's al Ghul, with his belief in the destruction and rebirth of Gotham, becomes less a personal threat and more a symbol of the fear that has dominated Gotham's past. Ra's and Batman's ideologies stand in direct contrast. Ra's believes that Gotham's destruction is necessary for its rebirth, while Batman believes the city's future lies in growth and healing. Their confrontations shift from physical battles to a clash of ideals, forcing Batman to confront the core of his identity as a hero, to understand that true change comes not from violence or destruction, but from rebuilding and reconciliation. Batman must realize that the real battle is not simply about fighting Ra's al Ghul, but about fighting the fear and division that has defined the city for so long. Two-Face serves as another crucial part of Batman's understanding of Gotham's healing process. Harvey Dent's tragic fall from the idealistic district attorney to the embodiment of duality is an example of Gotham's own struggle with the balance between order and chaos. Two-Face's belief that chance governs fate challenges Batman's need to impose order on the world. However, Batman now sees Two-Face's tragic fall not just as a personal failure, but as a reflection of Gotham's own duality, the tension between hope and despair, order and chaos, that has long defined the city's fate. Batman realizes that justice is not something that can be imposed, but must come from choice, from balance, and from a willingness to accept the duality of life itself. As Batman continues to lead Gotham, he also faces new tests in his relationship with the Justice League. His involvement with the League has always been complicated. While Batman's methods were often questioned, his leadership and strategy were never in doubt. But now, with his evolving understanding of fear and control, Batman must reconcile his role as Gotham's protector with his responsibility to the world at large. He realizes that the same principles that he's embraced in Gotham, working with others, sharing responsibility, and accepting vulnerability, must also extend to his work with the Justice League. This shift allows him to work more closely with his fellow heroes, not as a lone wolf, but as a leader who believes in the power of collaboration. Batman's role in the Justice League becomes central to his growth as a hero, as he learns to lead with trust, influence, and a sense of shared responsibility. But even in this new team dynamic, Batman never loses sight of Gotham. His love for his city, once the driving force of his obsession, becomes the foundation of his new perspective. Gotham, after all, is where his journey began, and it will always be the place where his true purpose lies. With the support of the Justice League, Batman begins to expand his influence beyond the confines of Gotham, using his role as a member of the League to help other cities and heroes face the same challenges that he has confronted. He understands that the world is not just filled with villains and criminals to fight, but fears and insecurities that need to be addressed and confronted. As the city begins to heal from years of suffering, Batman finds himself on a path that is no longer defined by revenge or control. He still wears the cowl, still walks the streets of Gotham, but his mission is now more focused on leadership and community building. He is no longer fighting for control. He is fighting for change, for a city that can rise above its past and embrace a future that is not defined by fear, but by hope and resilience. As Batman's role as Gotham's protector evolves, his understanding of what it truly means to be a hero becomes ever more refined. The city, once a symbol of hopelessness and decay, is slowly being transformed into a place that is rising above its past. Batman's willingness to embrace vulnerability, to work alongside others, and to accept his own humanity has shifted the very fabric of the city. The fear that once defined Gotham now serves as a catalyst for change, and the chaos Batman once fought against is now part of a greater understanding of life and justice. His influence continues to grow, not just in the streets of Gotham, but in the broader world of superheroes. Batman, once seen as the Dark Knight who worked alone, has now taken on a leadership role within the Justice League. His evolving relationship with the League is a significant marker of his development. He understands that teamwork, collaboration, and trust are essential to tackling the immense challenges faced by the world's greatest heroes. No longer isolated by his fear of failure or loss of control, Batman's ability to lead becomes a defining characteristic of his role. The Justice League benefits from Batman's unique perspective on fear and humanity. His focus on empowerment rather than domination, on growth rather than retribution, is something that even heroes like Superman and Wonder Woman come to appreciate. His role within the League is no longer that of the stoic strategist, but of a mentor, someone who teaches the others that true strength does not lie in control, but in understanding and accepting the complexities of the world. His leadership is no longer about directing the fight, but about inspiring others to believe in themselves and their own capacity for change. As his relationship with the Justice League strengthens, Batman also begins to redefine his methods. Gotham is still his home, his heart, but he knows that he cannot be the only protector. The League, a team built on the strengths of its diverse members, becomes a symbol of unity and hope. Batman's desire for control begins to dissipate as he realizes that true justice lies not in his personal crusade, but in the collective efforts of those who stand by him. Superman's hope, Wonder Woman's compassion, and Flash's optimism are all aspects of heroism that Batman once found difficult to trust. But now, he understands that they are equally important to the greater good. His efforts in Gotham start to take on a new dimension. Batman's fight for justice becomes inclusive, a call for everyone in the city to stand up and take responsibility for the future. As the crime rate begins to fall and the criminal underworld is dismantled, the people of Gotham begin to reclaim their city. Batman's message is no longer one of fear but of hope, and it spreads like wildfire across the streets of Gotham. Citizens, once too afraid to act, begin to stand up against the forces of chaos that have defined their lives for so long. This transformation, however, is not easy. Old habits die hard, and not everyone in Gotham believes that change is possible. The corrupt elite who have long held power in the city are reluctant to relinquish control. They see the shifting tides as a threat to their own dominance and fight to maintain the status quo. But Batman, no longer driven by vengeance, stands firm in his belief that Gotham's future lies in the hands of its people, not the criminals, not the corrupt politicians, and certainly not the invisible elite who have manipulated the system for so long. The true power of Gotham rests with those who are willing to stand together to challenge the system that has kept the city in chains for so long. In his final confrontation with the remaining forces of corruption, Batman realizes that his fight against crime is not just about arresting criminals. It's about changing the system that has allowed corruption to thrive in the first place. Gotham's redemption is not just about fighting the villains, but about rebuilding the city, one block at a time. Batman's efforts to rebuild are not just about cleaning the streets, but about creating sustainable change, empowering the people, and ensuring that the next generation has the tools they need to lead. Batman's relationships with the citizens of Gotham, his family of allies, and the Justice League are tested time and again, but they also grow stronger with each passing day. Alfred, ever his guide, remains at Batman's side, offering the counsel that Bruce Wayne so desperately needs. As Batman's sense of self and purpose evolves, he begins to rely on Alfred not just as a caregiver, but as a partner in Gotham's rebirth. Gordon, too, becomes a key ally in Batman's quest for a new Gotham, one that is no longer defined by fear and crime, but by hope and resilience. Through all of this, Batman learns that Gotham's salvation does not rest on one man's shoulders. It is a collective effort, one that involves the entire city, from the brave souls on the streets to the heroes who rise to fight alongside Batman. Gotham's future is not predetermined by fate or chance, but shaped by the choices of those who choose to act, to change, and to believe. Ultimately, Batman's greatest lesson is that fear does not have to define his mission. His fear of failure, of losing control, is no longer a driving force. Instead, his acceptance of fear, as part of both himself and Gotham, becomes the source of his strength. It is through understanding fear, embracing humanity, and working with others that Batman becomes more than just Gotham's protector. He becomes its symbol of redemption, showing the people of Gotham that even in the darkest corners of the city, there is always the potential for light. As Batman delves deeper into his evolving role as Gotham's protector, he begins to realize that his identity is no longer confined to the role of the lone vigilante. Gotham is changing, and with it, his approach to justice. His inner transformation allows him to see Gotham not just as a city that needs to be saved from the criminals who roam its streets, but as a community in need of healing, collaboration, and collective responsibility. The fight against crime and chaos is no longer just Batman's burden alone. As he embraces vulnerability, he understands that hope for Gotham's future depends on the strength of the people and the relationships he forms, both within Gotham and beyond. Batman begins to lean into his relationships with the people around him: Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, and the Justice League, acknowledging the fact that no hero, no matter how skilled or determined, can fight the battle alone. It's in working together with his allies that Batman begins to see how powerful a united Gotham can be. Over time, Gotham becomes less of a battleground, less a place that requires total control through fear and force, and more a city on the rise, one that's capable of transforming itself. Alfred, who has long been the moral center of Bruce's life, starts to see in Batman a man capable of genuine healing. Alfred's constant guidance, once tempered with concern for Bruce's well-being, now becomes rooted in a sense of hope for a Gotham that can finally heal. Alfred's role in Batman's life shifts from that of a caregiver to that of a trusted partner in the city's rebuilding. He, too, becomes an instrument of change in Gotham, providing wisdom, support, and a reminder to Batman that while change is often difficult, it's possible. Gordon, once wary of Batman's methods and his refusal to work with the police force, begins to see Batman's new path as the key to Gotham's future. In their shared fight against Gotham's criminal underworld, Gordon begins to work alongside Batman not just to impose order, but to inspire the people to fight back against corruption. The collaboration between the GCPD and Batman becomes the model for how Gotham can reclaim its city from those who have held power through fear and violence. The Justice League is no longer a team Batman stands apart from. Rather, Batman's relationship with them becomes one of mutual respect and trust. The League, while always acknowledging Batman's unique skills, now sees him as a leader not just in battle, but in humanity. Superman, once a contrast to Batman's darker methods, now works alongside him to ensure that Gotham is no longer isolated, that the heroes of the world unite in Gotham's efforts to rebuild. Batman, still a master tactician and strategist, learns that true leadership is not just about taking charge. It's about listening, collaborating, and empowering others to share in the fight. As Batman grows as a leader, so does Gotham's chance at transformation. However, as Gotham begins to evolve into a city of hope, the criminal element is not easily subdued. Even with the combined efforts of the Justice League, Gotham's corrupt officials, and the city's underworld, Batman knows that the struggle is ongoing. Gotham, much like Batman himself, has not yet fully healed. The criminals he faces, the Joker, Two-Face, Ra's al Ghul, and others, are not just isolated threats to the city, but projections of the fear and chaos that have long dominated Gotham. The Joker, in particular, refuses to allow Gotham's healing process to be easy. His chaotic nature, a direct reflection of Batman's own internal struggle, serves as a reminder to Batman that fear will always be a part of Gotham, but it is how they deal with it that will determine the city's future. The Joker's influence forces Batman to confront a terrifying truth: chaos is unavoidable. Batman, for so long obsessed with imposing order, begins to understand that he cannot control every aspect of Gotham's fate. This realization is a pivotal moment for Batman. He is forced to recognize that the city's salvation does not come from control, but from the collective will of its people. Batman's fear of losing control and becoming like the very criminals he fights has always been his greatest weakness. It is only when he accepts that chaos will always exist that he can truly lead Gotham out of the darkness. Through this journey, Batman finds that fear does not have to define him. The fear of becoming the villain, of losing control, and of letting Gotham fall no longer drives his every action. His fear, once a tool that kept him in the shadows, is now a motivator to help him connect with others, to inspire hope and empower the people of Gotham. Batman begins to see his role not as a lone vigilante, but as a leader, someone who can unite Gotham and give it the tools it needs to rebuild. The evolution of Batman's mission is also seen in his relationship with the people of Gotham. What was once a city plagued by fear, ruled by criminals and chaos, becomes a city of hope where Gotham's citizens take responsibility for their own future. Batman, while still the symbol of strength, now works alongside the people who, once paralyzed by fear, begin to rise above it. Gotham's rebirth is a collective effort, not the work of one man, but the shared responsibility of everyone who calls Gotham home. In Batman's final realization, he understands that true justice is not about control or vengeance, but about accepting the uncertainty of the world. By embracing fear and using it to drive his growth and compassion, Batman becomes more than just a protector of the city. He becomes a symbol of redemption, not just for Gotham, but for anyone who has faced their own darkness and come out stronger on the other side. Gotham's future, and Batman's own future, are no longer defined by the need for control or the fear of what they might become, but by the hope that they can rise above their past. Batman's journey from the Dark Knight driven by fear and obsession to a symbol of hope and empowerment reflects his deepest internal battle and transformation. In the beginning, Gotham was a city he sought to control and protect from the chaos he feared. His mission was defined by a relentless pursuit of justice and order, fighting against criminals, corruption, and the darkness that threatened to overrun his city. Yet, through his battles, both physical and psychological, Batman comes to realize that the city's true healing does not lie in his control, but in the collective strength of the people who live there. Through the process of embracing his own humanity, accepting his fear, and learning to work alongside those who care for him, Batman evolves into not just a protector, but a leader. His fear, once a weapon that isolated him, becomes the very thing that drives him toward growth. He learns that Gotham's salvation is not about defeating crime or restoring order through sheer force, but about inspiring the city's people to rise above the chaos they've lived with for so long. Gotham's future becomes tied not to Batman's solitary efforts, but to the unity and collaboration that he fosters among its citizens. The relationship Batman develops with his allies, Gordon, Alfred, and the Justice League, transforms from one of mere tactical collaboration to one rooted in mutual trust and shared responsibility. He begins to understand that even the greatest hero cannot stand alone. True heroism comes from collective effort, from trusting others and embracing the vulnerability that makes them stronger. Batman's ultimate realization is that fear does not have to define him. His power comes not from controlling Gotham's destiny, but from believing in others to shape their own futures. The villains who once haunted Gotham, from the Joker to Ra's al Ghul to Two-Face, represent not just external threats, but mirrors of Batman's own fears. As he confronts these figures, he is forced to face his internal battles, his fear of becoming the villain, of losing control, of embracing the chaos that lies at the heart of both Gotham and himself. In accepting that chaos, in understanding that order cannot be imposed, Batman finally finds the balance that has long eluded him. Ultimately, Batman's transformation is not just about fighting crime or saving Gotham. It is about learning to embrace humanity, face his own fears, and lead through example. He accepts his vulnerability, works alongside others, and becomes a symbol of hope for a city once defined by its darkness. Gotham begins to rise above its past, not through the force of one man, but through the strength of its people. Through self-acceptance, Batman finds his true purpose, not to be a lone avenger, but a leader who helps guide others to transform themselves and their city. Gotham's journey toward redemption is far from over, but with hope and unity, it can finally break free from the cycle of fear that has defined its existence for so long. Batman, though still haunted by his past, becomes a beacon of resilience and growth, showing the world that even in the face of chaos, there is always hope for the future.